Marjo Kuosmanen, and I'm chairing this session. And then we have a couple of HR professionals, as same as some artist who is good in giving the professional aspect on the panel as well. So maybe just we start by introducing ourselves and then go to the Q&A. So the rule of the game is that you are free to ask questions anytime. Just raise your hand and you have the opportunity to ask. So I think that this is a really good opportunity now to use us as we work in the HRs in the companies and know about the processes and what are the things that we look in the CVs and interviews as well. So I'm based in Helsinki, in Finland, working in Rovio, and worked in the game as a games HR for 2.5 years now. And before that, my background is from Nokia and UPM. And I just love the industry, and I hope that I have many years to come in the gaming industry as well. Then we have Paulina.
Hi, my name is Paulina Basta, and I'm working at Techland. If you know Dying Light, for example, that's one of our titles. Previously, I worked for companies like IBM and HP, so I do have a bit of a IT background behind, like Mario here as well. Totally proud to be here and very much interested in the overall idea of initiatives like ours, Women in Games. That's something that's at Techland very close to our heart. So very happy to be here.
Hey, I'm Roisin. I work for King, if anyone knows the game Candy Crush. So in terms of my role, I look after the campus recruiting. So I look after our internship and graduate and MBA hiring for Europe and Asia. So, you know, if anyone has any specific questions around the kind of internship and graduate hiring we do, happy to answer those. And again, you know, women in gaming is very, you know, a huge topic in King at the moment for us and really, really important. So it's really nice to be here today.
Hello, I'm Jess. I'm an artist currently working at an indie studio in Guildford called Womderstruck. I've been working in the games industry for about 7 years, and I'm here to sort of provide the other side of the table, your side of the table, perspective here amongst all these HR managers. I can tell you what it's like, you know, when you're interviewing, when you're sending out your portfolio, when you're getting rejection after rejection, and how to eventually land your dream job, because that's what I'm doing now, my dream job.
Hi, my name is Andreas. I work for Wooga. We are a mobile games developer, primarily casual games, based in Berlin. We're about 250 people. My job there is to hire people, so I'm the one dishing out the rejections, but also doing the nicer task of hiring. We're a very international company. Over 50% of us are not from Germany, and we also, in terms of women in games, also very dear to our hearts. We're 30% female as a company, and yeah, look forward to your questions.
Okay, do you have any questions at this point, or should I warm up the audience a bit? So maybe to start about HR first, so to give our perspectives about the recruitment process and how many applications do you get usually if you open one position. So Andreas, any figures to give us if you publish a programmer position, so how many applicants do you usually get?
Kind of depends. So a few factors. So firstly, which level of seniority the position is, I think, is the most reliable indicator of how many applications you're going to get. In general, junior positions tend to get a lot more applications than senior ones, right? There's fewer heads of whatever art directors out there than there are junior character artists. So aspiring art directors, but you know, a little less far down the line. Another factor, I think, is how rare the skill set that you're looking for is. If for an engineer you're asking for some very little known or maybe newer technology in their experience, it's less likely you're going to get a lot of qualified candidates at least. And then there's also just seasonal factors. So at certain times of year, specifically around the academic calendar, you get a lot more applications than at other times of year. And then there's also stuff that I can actually control, like how many places I'm advertising it. Anyway, those aside, Wooga, at being fairly well known within our specific industry, I would say on average across all the years, 3.5 years I've worked there, on average each position per week will get around 30, 35 applications, all things considered.
I just thought about one thing when you were talking, Andreas. In my perspective, when we say it's a fact, we do get a lot of applications for junior positions. Like when people graduate, they tend to send us their resumes in bulks. And that's a fact. The question is, what happens next? And I don't know if you guys agree, but the majority of these CVs are pretty much similar. I mean, there's not much going on there. And you might get, if we leave you with this information that, yeah, there's tons of CVs sent to us by graduates, that's one option. But the second option is to tell you also that these CVs are not the best quality. We look at them and we go, okay, next, and next, and next, because they look very much the same. The information that we want to tell you today is very much about the type of application that you send, and even if it's the number 110 that we receive during the day, if you stand out and if you really tell us who you are, why we should hire you, we would really look at your application, even though we have many of them. That's one thing I wanted to add.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that because we receive masses of applications, being completely honest. I mean, on a yearly basis, thousands, right? But that's on a yearly basis. But I totally agree insofar as it's how you make yourself stand out. So art is a prime example of that, right? So if you're applying for a graduate artist role, don't just send us the CV with your name and your academics and, you know, some of your interests. Put your, you know, add in your links to your portfolios. Maybe show us your portfolios with your application. You know, one or two applications that really stand out is, you know, someone sent us a CV, but they'd actually put their, you know, they've been so creative that if you know King Games, it's all about the sagas, right? So the Candy Saga or the Farm Saga. And they'd actually mapped out their journey on a saga, on a CV. And it was so cool, and it also showed off their, you know, their artistic skills. And that CV just jumped out, and you know, as soon as I looked at it, it was going to the hiring manager, and I was like, hey, look at this, and that person, you know. And don't, it's also important to know, every CV is looked at. So, you know, when we receive CVs for every single, we will absolutely go through every single CV. But it is true, it's standing out. So, you know, you don't want to take up a massive amount of business time in interviewing loads and loads of people. So you want to pick the best people. And in order to do that, you know, what's going to make me pick CV A over CV B? And it's really showing, actually, you know, have you done research on this company, and how can you show that off in your CV? And it's also about tailoring your CV to the company and the roles that you're applying for. The biggest mistake that people make is having one CV and sending that same CV to every company, to every role. You need to be looking at every single job spec, looking at the words that's in there, what are they looking for, and making sure that you're, you know, tailoring it to it, right? So you should really be thinking about that for every single role that you're applying for. Look at the job spec, look at the requirements, and think, how can you show that off in your CV so the person who's looking at it will go, job spec, CV, this matches.
I guess I can say a little bit about that as well, because as an artist, I've spent a lot of time, showing off my portfolio to various potential employers. And one thing I've actually noticed now on the other side, because we occasionally, people want to work at my studio now, and we look at some CVs, and the whole art team sort of looks at them, and it's kind of surprising the number of people who will apply for an art role and give a portfolio that's full of the wrong kind of thing. Like, you're applying for a 3D job, we want to see your 3D work up front. Don't hide it behind all of your sketches and your illustration work, which, they might be lovely, but that's not what we're looking for. So as much as you're tailoring your CV, tailor your portfolio, and tailor, if you're a programmer or a designer, if you're sending demos or links to stuff that you've done, make sure that it's something at least vaguely tangentially related to what the studio is doing. Because if it's something completely different, it's like, well, that's nice, but we don't know if you can do what we need you to do.
Apologies, but one more thing I need to add to that, because particularly in my experience, I've met a lot of women who gave up on applying to jobs that weren't 100% fit in their experiences and skills. And this is exactly why I want to follow up on what you've just said. Yes, do read the job specs and do send us the work that would enable us to judge whether you're a good fit for the job or not. But don't be too harsh on yourself. Don't try to send the best art that you've ever made or a person could ever make. Be objective, but be good on yourself as well. I mean, show us what you've got and let us judge as well. Sometimes send us your mistakes as well. Fine, we will look at it, and if we don't give you the type of job you're applying to, maybe we would be able to suggest something else. Find the right balance. Not letting us know about yourself is not the best hiring strategy neither, just about the balance.
Okay, thank you. Any questions at this point? Do you want any? Yeah. Is there a... Yeah.
It's going back to an earlier point you made about making your CV suited to the role. But if you're not an artist, how would you suggest making it interesting other than putting something pretty on it? Because if you're not very good at sketching, I can't imagine that being a very good route otherwise.
I think it's... Just to clarify, it's if you're not applying for an art role, for example, you're applying for a developer role, or it's so. I mean, for us, it's let's go with a developer role as another example. It's really important that obviously you've gone to school and you've done well, but it's also as well we want to see what apps have maybe you developed yourself. What have you done that will make it different to the previous CV. So I think it's not, for art it's about showing off the art, but I think it's just about the role that you're specifically applying for. For developer roles, we love to see when people have made their own games in their own time, and they put that link on their website. Like, the first thing I always do is actually go to that link and take a look. So it's just about being creative and thinking about how will your CV be maybe slightly different to the previous 5 we've just looked at.
And one more thing, because to many companies right now, for example, Techland is this sort of a company that would not only look at your set of skills, but also at you as a person, if that makes sense. When I look at your CV, I would try to find a person in there. So even if you are a programmer, and you are giving me a set of hardcore skills in there, I would look at the section hobbies, or I would look at what else you tell me. I would look at, okay, so what is he trying to say? Because then we really try to, and I think we are successful in that, trying to hire people and not skill sets, okay? That's one of the things as well.
There's one question here first.
Thanks, anyway.
Yeah. Let's try.
So, as someone who wants to go into the video games industry, but not from the industry, so background in something completely different, what would you sort of offer advice to, either to tailor the CV or tailor the covering letter to make perhaps myself stand out against someone who has got industry experience? The hair already does the job. I try my best, but on paper, I guess.
So Andreas, what would you say?
I would say, so there's ways without having professional experience in the industry of demonstrating that you have personal ambition or professional ambition, right? And I would say the most impressive things, or the things that leave the strongest impression of that ambition to me, are taking on projects in whatever, extracurricular, or if they're part of your course, and showcasing those that are related to games. So if you participate in game jams, make that very clear. Again, sorry, I did just have one point about, I don't want people coming away with the wrong idea about that your CV needs to look pretty. This is not at all the case. Like, a pretty CV is one that's just like elegant and kind of presents information clearly. The most relevant information most clearly and concisely, right? So in this case, somebody with no professional experience, I want to see up front these sorts of projects. Like I said, game jams. So anyway, the point being, just take on extracurricular project. If that is an interest of yours, right, it's easy to say that you're interested, show it. And that's what I would argue.
Yeah, there we go.
I was wondering, could you give us some practical tips or advice on how to negotiate contracts or pay?
So the question was any practical tips how to negotiate compensation things, benefits, salary?
I can just one tip is just do some research and be forceful without being a dickhead, basically. Right, so if you do your research and you have references, you can say, well, my friend does this job at another company, a similar size, and they earn this much. If you use that as, that's empirical evidence, that's a good argument, right? You can be confident in using that as your negotiating chip. If you just come in with a wild figure based on nothing, then it's less likely that it's gonna fall on open ears. But yeah, I think most good employers, actually this is a really good warning sign, I would say. If you're in a negotiation of somebody who supposedly wants you to work for them, and they're being the other way around, right, very forceful and not open to hearing counter arguments, probably not a good sign, right? That tends to say something about that organizational culture. So yeah, do your research, have that if you do feel like what you're being offered is unfair.
So because obviously most of y'all are thinking about your first job in the industry, definitely do have a salary number in mind, because my first job, I went in completely blind. They gave me the call and they were like, hey, yeah, we'd like to hire you. And I was like, oh my God, that's fantastic. And like, how much, what sort of salary expectations do you have? And I'm like, money, just whatever, man. And they're like, okay, that's fine. So they put me on the lowest possible starting rate for an artist. And it can be difficult in some companies to progress, to get pay rises. This was one of those companies. And I ended up the lowest paid member of my team. Incidentally, the rest of my team was dudes. So, there might have been a couple factors at play there. But do have a number in mind when you go into that negotiation. And have a minimum number as well, because some companies will just really try and cheat you.
There's one thing I wanted to add to that as well. There might be a practice. Include yourself and your needs in your estimations. Before you go to the employer telling them how much you want to earn, think about how much you're life costs you, how much you pay for rent, how much you will pay for transport. Calculate that. Know how much money you need to live the way you want to live, comfortably. That's one thing. And the second thing that helps you do that is knowing that work is selling your time and skills and engagement for money. This is the type of transaction we are talking about here. So know how much it costs you and what you need to get in exchange.
Okay,
Yeah.
we had one question. Oh, sorry.
No. I mean, I was just going to say, I agree with all of that, but I think what is most important is how you approach those conversations. So, in general, companies expect that you're going to negotiate, and to be honest, you should. And definitely guys do it a lot more than girls, right? So, I would strongly encourage you, do it. But how you approach that conversation is so important. If some people can be, I don't want to use the word, but like they can be a little bit obnoxious, or you just get off the phone and you don't want to help them, right? Because of how they've approached that conversation with you. Whereas if you're like, look, I've looked at it, I've spoken to other people, this is what they've been offered, I'm moving to London, it's a really expensive city to live in, I've thought about this. We are much more likely to say, okay, let's go forward with this. So I think it's just really, really important. It's absolutely fine to negotiate, and you should, and I encourage it. But please, please just bear in mind when you start that conversation how you approach it, because it will help you a lot.
I've sat on both sides of the table recruiting people and applying to lots of jobs. Applying to jobs, especially job adverts, is there's a lot of pressure, and it's really, really draining. So when recruiters say, do your research on the company, tailor your CV, tailor your covering letter, that's really difficult to do across a lot of applications. And also you're told that your application has to be perfect grammatically, spelling, details-wise. And it's difficult to keep track of updates to your CV, there's something small changes, multiple applications on the go, multiple versions of your CV. Do you have any thoughts on the balance between the number of applications you do and the sort of the amount of time you spend in an individual one to make sure it's perfectly compliant?
One thing I would say is, it's definitely good to keep your options open and don't just limit yourself to one company. But I would also say don't just apply to them all, right? Because you need to be genuinely, have an interest in the company that you're applying to, right? Because if you don't really have that and you get through the application process, it's going to very quickly come out in the interview process. So I think it's important that you keep your options open and don't limit yourself to one, but I wouldn't go crazy and apply to them all, because particularly in the gaming industry, right? There's so many different industries. Like, if you're not interested in casual gaming and you're being interviewed by a head of studio of who that's their world, they're going to very quickly clock onto that. And culture is usually really, really important in companies, right? And they're interviewing you for your skills, but also like at King, our values. Like, we interview against all of our values, and if we feel that people aren't, don't fit in with those values, and we feel that people aren't passionate about King and King's games, it doesn't matter how skilled you are, you won't get the job. So I think it's about finding that balance.
Then we had one here.
Yeah, so everyone on the panel mentioned the importance of women in gaming at the beginning. I would just like to understand what are your companies doing internally to actively hire more females?
Please say women instead of females. It's really weird when you say females. I've noticed it all day. People keep saying it, and it's like, just say women. Just say women. So obviously, not being someone in charge of hiring and being in a very small studio that doesn't really work with many recruiters, I can't say much on this. I do work with women in games to sort of help promote job openings, especially at studios that I know are more friendly towards diversity and more open to the idea. And I try and push my female friends into applying for jobs even when they're like, oh, I don't know if I'm really qualified for that. I'm like, you definitely are, go for it. But yeah, I'll hand over to someone.
Yeah, sure. I've been waiting for this question because it's actually something that I've been thinking about for the past months very heavily. Techland is one of these companies that grew from very small to 300 people right now, and we have 3 studios. We have an office in Vancouver, Warsaw, and Wrocław, both cities in Poland. What happens normally when companies grow organically is that you just go with the flow. You hire people as they arrive. You hire your friends or people that you know from the event you went to. And then there is a point in time when you look around and you see, okay, so the landscape is mainly male. So what happened is, what happened to us and to every other company, IT or technological company that I've worked for before, is that there is one point when you look around and you go, okay, so there's pretty much only men here. So why is that? And the first step that is happening at Techland right now is exactly this. We look around, we go, diverse workplace is important to us. We want to have fresh air in the studio. We want to have different people, different opinions. We want diversity. For some reasons, we don't have that yet, or not at the level that we would want to. So what we are doing right now is exactly that. We are analyzing what happened, that this is the status right now, and we are in discussions on what do we need to do next to enhance and change that trend. One thing that is a good sign for us. It's actually my presence here today. I woke up 4 o'clock in the morning to catch my flight here, and then I'm going to fly back in the afternoon and land at 1 a.m. Still within 24 hours. So. Exactly, because it's important to me and to us. You have to start with the analysis, and then you have to really commit to do the next steps. If you believe that you want to have a diverse working place, and this is the case for us.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with what you say. It's definitely as in, you know, when a company kicks off and it's like your friends and your friends and you know your friends and a lot of your friends are guys and your guy just kind of grows and expands. But it does come to a point, and for King at the moment, it's a massive topic. Like, we have a monthly CEO call, and every month, you know, Ricardo gets the question, what are we doing to get more women into this company? So there's a massive drive, actually, to make sure that we are hiring more women in. And you know, it can start with analyzing things, but it's also about, okay, well, where can we start improving things straight away? So, you know, for us, it's even simple things like making sure that there's at least one female interviewer on an interview panel, for example. That you don't come in and you meet, you know, if you have to do 5 or 6 interviews and every single interview for that person is a guy. So it's just about little things, but also as well, actually one of the main ways for King is the area that I'm working in, is in the campus hiring. That actually there's a massive focus, that there's a real balance of the young talent coming into King, so the junior developers, junior data scientists, junior artists, game designers, that actually it's a lot more balanced, because then, you know, they're the future of the company, right? So if we can bring in a better balance, and it's not just about bringing in more females, right? It's about having a more balanced, having the studios a bit more balanced. I mean, for King, 70% of our players are female, right? So, but you know, there's probably a lot more males in the studios. But at the same time, so we want to have that diversity. So for us, actually, one of the best ways we're doing this is from a campus hiring perspective. So it's going out in campus, you know, finding more of the women on campus, and going directly to them, because I think some women don't automatically think of the gaming industry. So we're actually trying to go out, and for example, this year we brought 10 girls away with us to GDC in San Francisco. It was amazing. Like, we had the best week, and the idea was we ran this. It was basically a competition where we had a huge amount of applications, and we opened it to all women across Europe, and we picked 10 and we brought them away to GDC, and they had the time of their lives, right? We did so much with them I had the time of my life. But it was an amazing week. But also it's about them going back, right? And being like, this was incredible. We met these people, and word just starts to spread. So, yeah, it's baby steps, but it's really, really important that as a whole in the gaming industry, we get more women into it.
Yeah, and I would like to say from on what Rovio, so our gender distribution is currently so that 70% is male and 30% is female. And what actually is really interesting that the game teams itself actually brought this up, so that we need more women in the industry, in the game teams, because if there's only a game team that it's only consisting of males, so there's too much testosterone in the room. So that's why they started to think that there might be actually something, and we have been quite successful now recruiting more women in Rovio. And what we are doing actually to support how would I say girls and females in the industry actually in Finland is that we are already part of this kind of program that supports 15 years and younger girls to code program, and then we offer them summer trainee positions for 4 weeks and so forth. So we are doing baby steps to supporting the whole, how would I say, the younger generation to come into the technology area more or less. Yeah.
I just have to plug my thing too.
Yeah.
No, so Wuga, yeah, I mean, this is one thing, a theme that's emerged over the course of the day, going to a lot of the talks, is that from the outside, the games industry still seems like an inhospitable place for women. And yeah, I think that it's really discouraging from the outside to try to make inroads into that. And yeah, I think that Wuga, for us, the most important thing is to change that impression, right? And one thing that we've done in that regard is to make sure that we're big fans of being present at industry conferences and just games industry events. And we've started to actively encourage, right? So thing is, if you present an opportunity to go out and give a talk, it is true that in general people don't volunteer for that unless they're supremely confident in their abilities as a public speaker and in their subject matter. And it has been a case where we've had to, our PR team has had to go and approach people internally at Wuga, women specifically, and said, listen, this is something you could offer a lot of insight, go out and give this talk. And we've now, I think our percentage is 60% of our external speakers are female, or excuse me, women. Yeah, okay, in that case it's okay. And that serves as a role model, right? If that's our ambassador out there, that hopefully will encourage and inspire other women to look at the industry differently, to look at Wuga differently, but hopefully at the industry at large. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm an international student, so I just want to know how flexible it is in game industries to offer visa sponsorship and hire international candidates.
Yeah, so we get so many international students applying to us, and I think what's important to know is if you're already on your visa and you haven't finished, it's important that you get into a company before that visa finishes. And that actually is really, really important, because then it's really easy. Then it's really straightforward. You're like anyone else applying. But at the same time, some companies are more flexible in this than others, I think. But I think what's most important is that typically people's visas run out the following January, but a lot of, for King and some other companies, their grad roles usually kick off in the September, so that's not an issue. For summer internships, it's not an issue in any way. And the best way, usually as well, is actually do the internship and get converted coming out of that internship, and then the visa issue doesn't come up. So we have lots of people coming in and joining us who are currently on visas as part of their university. But to make your life easier, the best way to do it is actually do an internship, get converted, because then the visa process is actually, it just transitions very smoothly.
Okay, I think we have time for a couple of questions still. Yeah.
Oh, I'll speak out. Speak up. Okay. Now, it's a great point about sort of growing companies, and they might not have time to look at diversity. Maybe this is a stupid question, but does the industry have best practice in encouraging diversity that, as you're starting up, or even as you reach 250, you're still busy, and leadership might not have time for this, but the sort of off-the-shelf best practice on diversity that HR could just take up? Does the industry have?
Does the games industry have best practice on literally anything? Most studios I know don't really talk to each other about that kind of thing. I mean, maybe the HR people are different, but most studios tend to, especially smaller studios that are growing, tend to pride themselves on their individualism and their unique business plans, and they don't really talk to each other about this kind of thing. There's no standards of practice that I'm aware of.
But the HR person would have a slightly different perspective. Yes, individualism, but also yes, standards. I mean, when you grow to be a company of 300 different people, and you look at your stats and you see absolute majority of men on board, and you see the obvious value of diverse workplace, yes, you do think about what's the reason why it happened and how to change it. And I don't think it would be an HR or the industry here standard. The standard is much wider. I mean, it's the business standard, how companies generally approach this topic. And yes, we do look around. Many of us working in the gaming industry like us both here. We've worked in other companies before. We do have professional networks in our countries and in Europe, worldwide. We do talk and we do implement the best practices tailored to our needs in our little companies. But yeah, we do look around. It's a good business strategy to look around and not to reinvent the wheel. I don't know if you want to add something to it.
No, I agree with that. I mean, I think it's important. Yes, HR drives it, but you know, it's definitely HR that usually ends up driving these subjects. But I think also as well, HR can only drive it so far. You need to have, and it just takes one person in the business who's passionate about it, and that's what helps. So I think it's HR can kick it off, but you know, for us, when you know our head of studio in London is a female, massively helps, right? So it's a real passion of hers. So therefore, you know, she can help us push it forward. But it can come from HR, but I definitely do think you need others on side, because sometimes I think people get very tired of HR's voice.
Okay, one more.
At the very, very end.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
I'm a 3D artist. I currently work in the film and television industry. I'm interested in working in games, and I wondered if any of you are aware of any similarities or differences between the games industry and the film and television industry.
Well, I happen to work with two animators who came from the sort of animation side of things. One guy who worked on Farthing Wood. Oh my God. So there's a lot of transferable skills, and then there's a lot of things that don't really cross over quite as much. But if you have animation experience or 3D experience in, you know, the sort of pre-rendered world, that is definitely a big help when you're applying for games jobs. There's a lot of transferable knowledge and skills between them.
Just to add one thing, from what I've seen, again, I can only speak for the specific industry I'm working in. It's mobile games, right? Casual games, which, by the way, more and more are kind of utilizing going with 3D as opposed to 2D. And for that, coming from either film or even AAA, it seems like you're a lot more specialized as a 3D modeler in those industries, so you'll specifically work on props or characters or environments, whereas if you do want to make the jump over, there's a premium in our industry on being more generalist, so having a bit and showcasing that in your portfolio as well. So not just submitting a portfolio full of swords, for example. That would be less transferable, I'd argue, or at least at first glance it looks less transferable from just making swords for years to modeling whatever, rabbits, cute rabbits or something. So yeah, I would say just show versatility in what you present. Yeah.
Yeah, let's take one more question to the back. Hey. Finally!
Hi, hello? Okay. I run the games programs here at Greenwich, so it's really important for me to make sure that our graduates are ready for the industry. But one thing which I seem to get feedback on is that in certain sections of the industry, and it's maybe more widespread than I'm aware, that people want students to be exactly the right shape to fit into the right hole. And what I was wondering is how much time, and this would be a graduate with potentially no experience, potentially 1 year's sandwich year placement. How much time and how much support do you give a recent graduate to be able to acclimatise and to train them? Because a lot of students, I think, leaving university are scared that they're going to be not up to scratch with people who have had years and years experience. So what do you do to support new people into the industry?
So for us, it's not a requirement that if you're coming in as a grad, we just assume you're not going to have experience. If you're applying for an team, there will be a couple of roles. So data science, sometimes, for example, we would need a bit of experience because it's just one of those areas that, it moves fast and crazy amounts of data to work with. But in general, for us, we assume you have no experience. So it's about your passion. It's about, what you've studied, what you do outside of that, your interests, who you are as a person. And it's all about potential. So we interview against potential. So we're like, right, do you know what? Is this person going to come in and work in a studio and just get their hands dirty and go for it? And if we see that and we see that they have the potential, they will get a job. So we hired loads of interns this year who had absolutely no experience, of which now lots of them have just been converted to permanent and they're working full-time and they're very happy. In terms of support, it really varies, I think, company and company. I think, for us, we have a strong buddy system in place. We have specific trainings that they go on. They have a very clear kind of goal setting that they do. We do induction. So there's lots of support and there's lots of training in place for them. We're building out a specific 2-year graduate program that they will actually go on, and it's either about going on the leadership path or it's becoming going on the subject matter expert path. And built into that is actually going to be specific trainings that they will do to get to that place. But that's not every company does that, so I think it's on a company basis.
To add something to that as well, at Techland we really try to hire people with talent. I mean, the recruitment process as such is quite difficult on purpose. But once we make an offer to somebody, it means that we really want you in the family. Once you're in the family, you get as much support as you need. The bottom line is to respect people's intelligence and talent at the end. I mean, you hire artists, you hire designers, you hire creative people to let them be creative. So as long as you are willing to work, as long as you are willing to learn as well, we did AAAs. On board, we have a lot of people that you know from the covers of our games. Some of us are pretty much celebrities. So once you get on board, you look around and you see people that you want to learn from, and they do give you the support. So I wouldn't say, and I think it's the industry that works this way. It's not only us. It's the type of the vibration that happens in our studios. Most of us are not like thousands and thousands of people. When I worked for IBM, in my office there were 5,000 people. It's very hard to be supportive to every single person. Now 300, it's like a big but still a family, like you know every single name. So the type of support you can actually give people is much easier and much more physical.
Yeah, it's funny that you used the name family. I'd never heard it before until I came to King, but it's very much welcome to the King family when you arrive.
Okay, hey, thank you. Thank you for panelists and thank you audience, and we are still here.